My son's wife called me useless at Thanksgiving. She treated me like her maid. Until I posted the truth. I had been peeling potatoes since 7 a.m., the smell of turkey already thick in the air. Angela had assigned me that job the moment. I walked through their front door the night before. "Mom, you can be in charge of the sides. You're so good at that," she'd said with that tone she used when pretending to be sweet. The kind of tone that sounded like she was offering me a choice. But we both knew it wasn't one. I didn't come to their house to be waited on. I knew my place, or at least I thought I did. I came to be with my family, to feel like I belonged. But as the hours passed, that feeling slipped further and further away. Angela barked orders while pacing the kitchen with a glass of wine in hand, not once offering to help. "Helen, make sure the yams don't burn," she snapped at one point. "Oh, and could you wipe down the counter again? The kids got crumbs all over it. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing." She didn't ask. She told. I had been standing for hours when the guests began to arrive. Angela's family, her sister Danielle with her perfect nails and fake laughter, her mother Ruth who refused to make eye contact with me unless it was to hand me something to carry, and a few neighbors I barely knew. The house filled with noise and laughter. I kept busy, trying not to feel the ache in my legs or the hollowness in my chest. This was my son's home. I should have felt welcome. Instead, I felt like I was crashing someone else's party. By the time the food was ready, Angela called everyone into the dining room. I stood behind the kitchen island, waiting for someone to notice I hadn't sat down. The table was full, every seat taken. I glanced at Brian, my son, thinking he'd say something, move over, pull up a chair for me. He didn't even look at me. He was too busy pouring wine for Ruth and laughing at one of Danielle's jokes. Angela's voice cut through the moment. "Mom, can you make sure the gravy boat gets passed down the table?" And that was it. That was my role. Not guest, not family. Just the person keeping everything running behind the scenes. The person who didn't get a plate unless there were leftovers. I brought the gravy, placed it in front of Angela, and as I turned to head back into the kitchen, I heard it. "She's practically useless now," Angela muttered under her breath, loud enough for the end of the table to hear. "But at least she's still helpful on holidays." A few people chuckled. I felt it in my chest like a punch. My hands tightened around the edge of the counter. My ears burned. I didn't say a word. I wiped my hands on my apron and went back to the kitchen. I stood there, staring at the sink full of dishes, while everyone else toasted and laughed. My son didn't defend me. He didn't even flinch. Later that evening, I was the last one to eat. Alone in the kitchen, I picked at the food still warm on the stove. Angela passed by, already in her slippers, holding her wine glass with the last splash of red. She paused in the doorway and said, "By the way, the trash is full." That was the moment I knew something had shifted inside me. I'd taken her comments before, the snide remarks, the dismissals, the constant undermining. I took them for Brian's sake, for the grandkids, for the sake of keeping peace. But something about this day, this particular Thanksgiving, broke whatever was holding me in place. That night, I slept in the basement guest room, the one with the mattress that sags in the middle and no curtain on the window. Angela made sure it was just enough to look polite, clean sheets, a folded towel, but cold, impersonal, like I wasn't part of the family, just a visitor who overstayed. I stared at the ceiling, my hands resting on my chest. Every word Angela said played back in my head. The way she rolled her eyes when I suggested setting a second table for the kids. The way she snapped when I asked if she needed help with the stuffing. The way she laughed when Ruth called my cranberry sauce a bit dated, but the worst part, the absolute worst part, was Brian. He never said a word, not once. He let them treat me like I didn't matter. He let his wife talk to me like I was an inconvenience. He let them erase me from my own family. That hurt more than anything Angela ever said. The next morning, I woke up early and took out the trash, just like she asked. No one else was awake, yet. The house was quiet. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the same one where everyone else had laughed the night before. I looked around at the spotless counters, the empty wine glasses, the folded napkins, and I realized something. This wasn't about one holiday. This had been building for years. The jokes Angela made at my expense, the way Brian started leaving, me out of decisions, the way they stopped inviting me to the kids' school events, saying things like, "It's more for the younger parents," the way I started shrinking myself, apologizing for existing, tiptoeing around in a house I helped pay for. Because yes, I did help. When Brian lost his job 5 years ago, I dipped into my savings to cover their mortgage. I paid for the kids' daycare. I bought groceries for months. I never said anything because I didn't want to make them feel bad. I thought I was doing what mothers do. But they forgot. They forgot who helped them stand when they were falling apart. They forgot who showed up without being asked. They forgot I existed. And now, I was useless. I sat at that table, holding my coffee, and made a quiet decision. I wouldn't confront them. I wouldn't raise my voice or throw their failures in their faces. That wasn't who I was, but I would no longer stay quiet. They wanted to erase me. I was about to remind them exactly who I was, and the first thing I did, I opened my laptop. After Thanksgiving, I went home and cried in the laundry room. I didn't want to sit on the couch or lie down in bed. I didn't want to look at the pictures of Brian and the grandkids on the mantle. I felt embarrassed for even being surprised. This wasn't new. It had been building for years. When Brian and Angela were first married, things were different. I helped them buy their first house. Not just with advice, with real money. I gave them $38,000 from my retirement fund for the down payment. I told Brian it was a gift. I said it was because I believed in them. What I didn't say was that I had been working overtime shifts at the hospital for nearly 2 years just to make that money stretch. I was already 58 at the time. That money was supposed to be my safety net, but I gave it to them, gladly. After Angela had their first child, I moved in temporarily to help. She'd had a complicated delivery, and Brian was working long shifts. It was only supposed to be for a few months until things got easier. That was 5 years ago. I never left. Not because I didn't want to. I asked a few times. Angela always had a reason for me to stay. We could use the help with the kids. The daycare costs are killing us. It's just until we find a better routine. And each time, I said yes. They converted the den into a guest room for me. A twin mattress, a dresser, and a door that didn't close all the way. It was the one room in the house without a lock, without curtains, without heat in the winter. Every year, Angela would say, "We'll upgrade it soon." You know, when we finish the kids' playroom or remodel the kitchen. They finished both. My room stayed the same. She never called it my room. The guest room, she'd say. Even when I lived there full-time, even when I paid a third of the utilities every month, even when I covered half the groceries, I wasn't a guest. I was a built-in solution. I cooked, I cleaned, I watched the kids, and when someone needed to be blamed for something, I was conveniently there. Angela had a way of saying things that felt like stabs in slow motion. A few months before Thanksgiving, she asked if I could start parking further down the street. "We need the driveway for deliveries," she said. "And honestly, the neighbors are asking who the extra car belongs to." Who the extra car belongs to, like I was a stranger. When Brian lost his job for almost a year, it was me who kept the lights on. I paid the mortgage 3 months in a row. Angela never said thank you. She just made a passing comment one night. That it must be nice to be retired and have money lying around. I remember standing there in the kitchen with the gas bill in one hand and a wet dish towel in the other. I didn't say anything. I should have, but I didn't. Angela has this thing she does. She treats kindness like an obligation and gratitude like weakness. The tipping point wasn't Thanksgiving. That was just the moment everything finally connected. The day after, Angela sent me a text while she was upstairs in her bedroom. "Can you make sure the kids' uniforms are washed and ready for Monday?" I forgot to sort them last night. No, please. No, thank you. Not even a hey, just a demand. I stared at the message for a long time before answering. Then I didn't answer at all. Later that afternoon, I went into the laundry room and pulled out a box from the cabinet above the dryer. Inside were 3 folders. I had kept records, not because I was planning for anything dramatic, but because after a while, I needed to remind myself that I wasn't imagining it. I had itemized every payment I made toward the mortgage, every utility bill, every grocery trip where I paid and was never reimbursed. I had printouts of my own bank statements showing the direct transfers. There were texts, too, screenshots, messages where Angela asked me to buy cleaning supplies, take the kids to the doctor, or pay for their field trip fees. All of it polite, on the surface but with an undertone that always assumed I would say yes. That I owed it. I had photos of the room I stayed in, that guest room, the old peeling paint on the door frame, the warped window pane, the single lamp with the broken switch. That was where I lived. The woman who paid half their bills, watched their kids, cooked every dinner, and was still treated like a maid. I started thinking about the things Angela used to say when Brian wasn't around. Little comments dropped like crumbs. "If you weren't here, we'd finally have space for a real home office." She gets confused about boundaries. You know how older people are. And once, to one of her friends during a coffee date, when she thought I was out of earshot. "Oh, we take care of her. It's like having another child in the house." Another child. It all made sense now. Angela never saw me as family. She saw me as a resource, a placeholder, someone she could use until she didn't need me anymore. What hurt most was that Brian let it happen. Maybe not at first. Maybe he didn't notice the way she spoke to me. But after 5 years, there's no excuse. There were so many moments he could have said something. When Angela talked over me, when she mocked the way I folded towels, when she told the kids not to bother Grandma, she's too tired, right after making me scrub the oven. He heard it. He just didn't care enough to stop it. That night, I sat on the bed and opened my laptop. Not for social media, not for emails. I opened a blank document. I didn't know exactly what I was going to write, but the words came anyway. I started listing the things I had done for them over the past 5 years. $38,000 for the down payment, $8,400 toward utilities, $11,000 in groceries, $3,600 in emergency expenses during Brian's unemployment, over 1,000 hours of unpaid childcare. Kept going, page after page, not to get recognition, but because I needed to see it for myself. I needed to see that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined this, that I wasn't being oversensitive. When I was done, I saved the file. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. Not yet. A few days later, Angela brought up the future at the dinner table. She talked about transitioning Grandma into her own place soon. She smiled when she said it, like it was a thoughtful suggestion. I asked, "Whose idea was this?" Angela shrugged. "Just something Brian and I discussed." Brian kept eating. I looked at him. He didn't look up. And that's when I knew. I wasn't being included in the discussion. I was being dismissed from their lives, politely, strategically, and without apology. I stood up, walked to the sink, and started washing dishes. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed a moment to breathe. Something was about to change. And for the first time in years, I was going to be the one deciding how. The week after Angela mentioned transitioning Grandma into her own place, I noticed little changes. She started locking her bedroom door during the day. That had never happened before. She took over the grocery list without asking and began buying prepackaged meals, saying it was easier this way. She made passive remarks at the dinner table about downsizing and clearing up space. One evening, she casually brought up that her cousin knew of a senior apartment complex that had great lighting and was quiet. It was always said with a smile, always meant to sound helpful. But I knew what was happening. I was being removed slowly, deliberately, so that when the final push came, they could say it wasn't cruel. It was logical. And Brian? He said nothing. If anything, he avoided eye contact when these little remarks came up. He just sat at the table, nodding sometimes, distracted by his phone or the kids. I couldn't remember the last time he looked me in the eye when Angela was in the room. On a Thursday morning, I overheard Angela on the phone in the laundry room. She didn't know I was in the hallway. No, she doesn't suspect anything yet. We'll probably tell her after Christmas. Yeah, January sounds good. That gives us time to clear out the room and repaint it. There was silence. Then she laughed. No, she won't make a fuss. She doesn't have anywhere else to go. I felt it in my stomach like a drop. My hands were shaking, but I didn't move. I just stood there in the hallway, hearing my future, being planned like I was a piece of furniture. The next day, I tried to bring it up with Brian while Angela was at work. He was in the garage, rearranging tools. Brian, I said, can we talk about something? He didn't turn around. Sure, what's up? I heard Angela say something yesterday. About January, about moving me out. I just need to know, is that happening? He finally looked at me. His face didn't show anger or guilt, just detachment. Mom, it's not like that. We've just been thinking about what's best for everyone. The kids need space. Angela needs her office back. And you've been here for a while. I pay for this house, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I paid for your mortgage when you couldn't. I pay for groceries. I help with the kids, and you're saying it's time for me to go? He sighed. It's not personal. It's just time to move forward, not personal. I left the garage without saying another word. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I stayed. In the guest room, lying on that sagging mattress, looking at the ceiling, wondering what it was going to take for them to see me as something more than a burden. 2 days later, I woke up to find that I had been blocked. Literally. I opened my phone to check the family group chat. It was gone. I tried to access a shared calendar I used for the kids' school schedules. Password changed. I checked Facebook and saw that Angela had unfriended me. Her page was now private. I called Brian. He didn't answer, so I sent him a message. Did something happen? No reply. That evening, Angela walked in, holding her phone. Can we talk? She asked, without looking at me. I nodded. She sat down at the kitchen island, calm, poised. I've been thinking a lot, and I think it's best if we take some space. There's been tension. The kids are picking up on it. Tension? I asked. You've been distant. And frankly, it's starting to feel like your presence is affecting the energy in the house. I stared at her. I had just spent the morning folding her laundry and cooking lunch for her kids. I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't said anything about the conversation I overheard, hadn't even asked about the group chat, and now I was being told that I was the problem. I think it would be good, she continued, if you started exploring other living options. We'll help you, but we can't do this forever. I wanted to ask where this was coming from. I wanted to ask how she went from calling me an angel when the kids were sick to calling me tense, but I didn't. I just got up and walked to the backyard. I stood on the patio, staring at the fence. I thought of all the days I spent out here, gardening, raking leaves, blowing bubbles with the kids when they were little. I was invisible in this house, and the people who I thought were my family were perfectly fine with it. That night, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop instead. I pulled up the file I had saved, the one with all the records, the bank transfers, the screenshots, the receipts, the grocery bills, the home improvement payments, the car maintenance I covered when Brian's transmission failed, the dental work I paid for when Angela said they just couldn't swing it right now. I had kept everything. I wrote a new document, just a few paragraphs, just the facts, no emotion, no drama. Then I closed the laptop. I wasn't going to post it yet. Not yet. First, I had to get my name off the autopay accounts. I canceled the grocery card. I stopped the monthly transfer I had been making to help with the mortgage. 3 days. Later, I got a message from Brian. Did you cancel the utilities? I didn't answer. Angela texted me an hour later. The internet was cut off. What happened? Again, no reply. 2 days later, Brian called. I picked up. Mom, what's going on? He asked, sounding more annoyed than concerned. I stopped paying, I said. What do you mean? I mean, I've been paying half the bills in this house for 5 years and I'm done. You're asking me to leave. That's fine, but I won't. Keep financing my own eviction. There was silence on the line. Then flatly he said, Angela's really upset. I imagine she is. You could have given us a warning. I think you gave me mine. He hung up. Later that evening, I heard Angela on the phone in the living room. She wasn't whispering this time. I don't know how we're supposed to cover all this. She just stopped. No explanation. No explanation? I looked at my calendar. I had 6 weeks until the end of the year. 6 weeks to figure out my next move. They had blocked me from their chats, erased me from their routines, and started planning how to remove me entirely. But they forgot one thing. I still had my voice, and they were about to hear it. A week passed with barely a word exchanged between us. Angela acted like I didn't exist. Brian kept his head down. The tension in the house was heavy, but no one said anything directly. They were still waiting for me to pack up and leave quietly, without creating a scene. But I had spent too long being quiet. I knew what they were hoping for. A smooth transition. One they could present as mutual, respectful, and normal. Something they could explain away to friends and extended family without ever admitting the truth. What they didn't count on was that I had receipts. Not just figurative ones, literal proof of every dollar I'd given, every bill I'd paid, every act of service they quietly accepted and then conveniently forgot. On Sunday morning, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table while Angela and Brian were still asleep. The kids were at a sleepover. The house was silent. I opened my laptop and logged into Facebook. I hadn't posted anything personal on social media in years. I mostly used it to see pictures of the grandkids and stay connected with a few old friends. But that morning, I typed slowly, carefully, making sure every word was honest, direct, and clear. I never thought I'd be posting something like this, but after being blocked from my own family's group chats, removed from shared accounts, and asked to quietly move out after years of support, I feel like I need to set the record straight. For myself, and for anyone who's ever been pushed aside after giving everything. I took a breath and kept going. 5 years ago, when Brian and Angela were struggling financially, I gave them $38,000 from my retirement fund to help them buy this house. I've lived in their home since then, helping raise the children, paying for groceries, covering half the utilities, and stepping in whenever money was tight. When Brian lost his job, I paid the mortgage 3 months in a row without being asked. When the dishwasher broke, I bought a new one. When the kids needed school supplies, I paid. I did it because I believed that's what family does, and I never asked for anything back. But over time, things shifted. I was no longer treated as a guest or a loved one. I became invisible, or worse, an inconvenience. My room was never improved. I was excluded from family conversations, mocked, behind my back, and gradually removed from daily routines. Then, after Thanksgiving, I was told it was time for me to explore other options and that I was affecting the energy of the house. I paused to reread it, then added the last paragraph. So to those who see a version of this family online and assume everything is picture perfect, just know that not all truths are visible in filtered photos. I don't want sympathy. I just want honesty. And if there's someone else out there who's been used, ignored, or erased after giving everything, I want you to know it's not your fault. Sometimes it's not you that changes. It's how people start seeing you when they no longer need you. I clicked post and set the laptop down. I didn't expect it to spread, but it did. Within 2 hours, the post had over 300 reactions. By evening, there were more than 200 comments and dozens of shares. Friends I hadn't heard from in years messaged me privately, old coworkers from the hospital, church members, even some of Brian's former teachers. Helen, this broke my heart. You've always been the most generous person I've known. I remember when you paid for the church roof repairs without telling anyone. You're not the problem, they are. I went through something similar with my daughter-in-law. Thank you for giving this kind of treatment a voice. Not everyone was supportive. A few people I barely knew, commented, "You shouldn't air family problems like this. This is petty and makes you look bitter." I ignored them. At EC, 6:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Angela. "What the hell did you post?" I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, Brian called. I let it ring. He texted after, "We need to talk. This is out of control." What was out of control, I thought, was how long they expected me to stay silent while being pushed out of my own life. An hour later, I heard the garage door open. They were back from wherever they'd gone. I stayed in my room. There was shouting downstairs. The door slammed. Angela knocked hard on my door. "You need to take that post down." I didn't answer. Another knock. "Helen, I'm serious. You're embarrassing the entire family." Still nothing from me. She opened the door without permission. "Are you really going to sit there and act like you're the victim?" I looked at her and said calmly, "I'm not acting. I'm telling the truth." Scoffed, "You made us look like monsters. You didn't need my help with that." Angela stood frozen. Her mouth moved slightly, like she had more to say, but nothing came out. "I'm done being quiet," I added. She walked out and slammed the door. The next day, I got a message from Angela's sister, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. "I read your post. I believe you. And I'm sorry." Then came a message from a neighbor. "We always wondered why you were never at the block parties anymore. Now it makes sense. The ripple effect was bigger than I imagined." Angela deleted her Facebook later that week. Brian deactivated his. I knew they were furious. I knew they were probably telling everyone a different version of the story behind closed doors. But they couldn't undo the truth. And that was the whole point. For years, they had controlled the narrative, made me feel like I was lucky to be tolerated. But when I put the truth out there, plain and simple, it shifted something. I wasn't begging for approval. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was just done pretending. And now, they had to live with the image they tried so hard to maintain cracking in front of everyone who once admired them. After Angela slammed the door, the house became completely silent. No footsteps, no slamming drawers, no muttering under her breath like usual. Just a long, uncomfortable quiet. I stayed in my room the entire next day, not because I was afraid or unsure, but because I wanted to give them space to sit with. The reality was simple. I hadn't lied, exaggerated, or twisted anything. I had spoken directly for once, instead of swallowing it all and pretending it didn't hurt. Now it was their turn to deal with the consequences. Brian didn't speak to me until 2 days later. He knocked once and then opened the door without, waiting for me to respond. A habit I used to ignore, but now it made my skin crawl. "Can we talk?" he said, closing the door behind him. I sat at the edge of the bed, arms folded. "If you're here to yell, save it," he sighed. "I'm not here to yell. But that post, that was too much, Mom." I looked at him. "Too much? You mean too honest? You made it sound like we abused you." "I posted facts, Brian. Nothing more. Every word is backed up with records you forgot I kept. You humiliated us." "No. I protected you for 5 years. That ended last week." He sat down in the chair near the wall. For a minute, he didn't speak. He just rubbed his hands over his face and looked down. "Angela's furious. She hasn't slept. She cried in front of the kids last night." "That didn't move me," I replied. "Then maybe she should think about the years I spent crying alone in this room after she treated me like I didn't belong here." He didn't respond. "I lost friends," he finally said. "People at work saw the post. My manager even asked if everything was okay at home. Maybe he should have asked that 2 years ago. He looked up. So what now? You going to stay and make our lives miserable? No, but I'm not leaving without what's mine. He frowned. What does that mean? I want my name back on the deed, or I want my money back, $38,000, plus what I've contributed since, or I can talk to a lawyer and let them sort it out. You're threatening to sue your own son? I stared at him. I'm telling you, I'm done being erased. If you want to act like I never existed, fine. But then give me back every cent I poured into this family. He left without another word. Later that night, I found a manila envelope left outside my door. Inside was a printout of a financial breakdown. Not complete, but enough to show that Brian had gone through his records. There was a sticky note on top in his handwriting. Let's talk. Just us. Tomorrow night. I didn't respond. The next day, I went downtown to speak with an attorney. A younger woman, maybe in her early 40s. She didn't treat me like a confused old lady. She listened carefully, reviewed my folder of documents, and asked clear questions. When I finished, she leaned forward and said, "Legally, you're on strong footing. Especially if you have proof of contributions and intent." Intent? I asked. You didn't give them that money as a gift, did you? No, I answered. I said it was to help, but I always assumed it meant I'd be taken care of. In return, they promised I'd have a place to live. She nodded. Then we can make a case. Even if it doesn't go to court, we can use that to negotiate. I walked out of her office with a strange feeling in my chest. Not anger, not satisfaction, just clarity. After all the years of being passive and silent, I was finally doing something for myself. That night, I met with Brian in the kitchen. Angela stayed upstairs. He laid out a few options. They couldn't afford to pay me back all at once, but he offered monthly payments. He said they'd start immediately, and that my name would be added to a legal occupancy agreement to ensure I wouldn't be removed without notice or compensation. I said, "That's a start." Then I added, "But I won't be staying here long term. This house doesn't feel like home anymore." He nodded. "I'm going to find a place. Small, quiet, mine." He looked surprised. "So, that's it?" "I'm giving you the same courtesy you never gave me. Warning, you'll have time. But once I'm gone, I'm gone." I got up and left the room. Angela avoided me the entire next week. She didn't speak to me unless absolutely necessary. But the tone had shifted. No more barking orders, no passive remarks about energy, no guilt-tripping about the kids, missing their grandmother, even though we both knew it was coming. One afternoon, a neighbor I hadn't spoken to in months rang the doorbell. When I opened the door, she said, "I just wanted to check on you. I read your post. I always suspected something was off around here." We stood outside talking for 15 minutes. Just normal conversation. No judgment. It felt good. Like I was re-entering the world as a person again. Not just a background figure in someone else's home. The following week, I found a listing for a small rental cottage not far from my old neighborhood. 1 bedroom, sunny kitchen, tiny backyard, with space for a few flower pots. It wasn't fancy, but it was enough. I scheduled a viewing. When I told Brian I was leaving within the month, he didn't argue. He just said, "Do you need help moving?" I said, "No, I'll hire someone." He paused. "The kids, they'll want to see you. I'll see them. On my terms." He nodded again, quietly this time. There was no grand confrontation, no explosive ending. But something had changed. I wasn't the same woman who kept her head down and waited to be acknowledged. I was finally acting like someone who deserved to be treated with respect, because I did. And whether Angela or Brian ever said the words, "I'm sorry," I didn't need them anymore. They'd already shown me exactly who they were, and now, I was showing them who I had become. 3 weeks after I signed the lease, I moved out. It was quiet the morning I left. Brian carried 2 boxes out to the car without saying much. Angela didn't come downstairs. The kids were at school, and that was probably intentional. There was no goodbye hug, no family picture, no dramatic farewell. I loaded the last bag into the trunk of the small hatchback I'd bought with my own savings, shut the door, and turned the key. Brian stood in the driveway as I backed out. I rolled down the window and said, "I'll be in touch with the kids next week. Let's schedule something." He nodded. "Okay." I didn't expect an apology. And I didn't get one. I pulled away from the house I had helped pay for, the one I helped hold together, and I didn't look back. The cottage I rented wasn't big, but it had everything I needed: a working stove, a decent mattress, a small washer-dryer combo in the hallway closet. More importantly, it was mine. No one knocked on my door asking me to do laundry or pick up someone else's child. No one told me I was affecting the energy of the house. No one reminded me of my place, because this place, finally, was mine. I spent the first few days in silence, not in the kind that hurts, the kind that heals. I didn't realize how much I needed to not hear footsteps upstairs, not feel tension in the hallway, not pretend to be invisible so I wouldn't be a problem. I started putting things in order, hung up my own curtains, bought fresh towels, framed photos of my grandchildren, not because I needed to prove I loved them, but because they were part of me, no matter what happened with their parents. I brought over a small bookshelf and filled it with paperbacks I hadn't touched in years, and for the first time in a long time, I read before bed without keeping one ear open for someone calling my name. The following weekend, Brian dropped the kids off, just the two older ones. Angela didn't come. She didn't even send a text. Brian didn't stay long. He handed me their overnight bags and said, "I'll pick them up tomorrow around 3. I said, "That's fine." The kids came inside, looked around, and said, "Grandma, it's so quiet here." I smiled. "I know. It's nice, isn't it?" We played board games. I let them eat popcorn on the couch. We walked to the park down the street. That night, I tucked them in on a makeshift mattress and blanket pile in the living room and sat with them until they fell asleep. I didn't need to perform or impress anyone. I was just being who I always had been. Someone who showed up. Someone who made them feel safe. That night, I posted a short message online. Not a follow-up to the long post. Not anything dramatic. Just a few words. "I'm in my own place now. Thank you to everyone who reminded me I'm not alone." The next morning, I received over 100 replies. Some from people I knew. Many from people I didn't. "You did the right thing. Your strength helped me do something I was afraid to. Thank you for speaking up. Your story is mine too." People shared their own experiences. Daughters, grandmothers, even caregivers who'd been discarded when they were no longer useful. I responded to a few, but mostly I just read, and realized something important. What happened to me wasn't rare. It was just rarely spoken about. We get told to be kind, be quiet, support our families, and ask for little. But no one talks about what happens when we do all that, and still get pushed aside. I didn't post the truth to hurt anyone. I did it because pretending nothing was wrong had become unbearable, and because being erased in silence is worse than being criticized out loud. A month after I moved in, I had lunch with an old friend I hadn't seen since before Brian's wedding. Her name was Patrice. We sat in a diner for nearly 2 hours. She told me about her granddaughter's school, and I told her about the new curtains I put up in the cottage. Normal things I hadn't talked about in years. When we finished, she reached across the table and said, "You seem lighter." I thought about that for a second. I think I am. Later that week, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. I opened it slowly. It was from Ruth, Angela's mother. We'd never had a close relationship, and to be honest, she rarely spoke to me when we were in the same room. The letter said, "I read what you posted. I didn't know half of it. Maybe I should have paid more attention. I won't pretend we were close, but I saw what you did for that family. I hope this new chapter brings you peace. No apology, but recognition." I placed the letter in a drawer and didn't think much more about it. Over the next few months, I found myself reconnecting with parts of my life I had let fade away. I started attending a book club at the library. I took a beginner's painting class on Wednesdays. I even signed up to volunteer at a nearby food bank. None of it was dramatic, but every choice was mine. I didn't need Angela's approval or Brian's permission, and as for them, they kept their distance. Brian texted occasionally to coordinate the kids' visits. Angela didn't speak to me directly for months. That was fine. I didn't want reconciliation. I wanted clarity, and I had it. One evening, after dropping the kids back at their house, Brian lingered at my front porch. He said, "Mom, I didn't know it got that bad." I looked at him. "You didn't want to know." He nodded. "That's fair." A long pause. "I'm sorry. It didn't fix anything. But it didn't have to. Because by then I was already standing in a space that belonged to me, surrounded by things I chose, living a life I reclaimed. I didn't need to be celebrated. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace, and I finally had it.